A white dress draped over the chapel pew, the soft toll of bells outside. Naomi's hand trembled as it reached for the doorknob of the church dressing room. She was minutes away from marrying Elijah, a man she called her second chance at peace. But what she heard through that door, it froze her in place. Two voices. Quiet. Urgent. One was Elijah's. The other, a woman's. Naomi didn't mean to listen. She hadn't planned to hear the truth before she walked down that aisle. But the words that slipped through that crack in the door weren't meant for her. And they weren't words of love. They were words that shattered everything. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you believe every bride should always trust her gut. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss stories like this. This version directly connects to Naomi and Elijah's backstory and sets up emotional tension and betrayal early. Naomi always said she wasn't chasing a fairy tale. At 41, she'd already buried 2 marriages. One ended in silence, the other in shouting. She'd raised a daughter who now lived in Dallas and visited on holidays, and she'd given up on the idea that anyone would ever sit with her on the porch just to watch the sun go down. Most days, Naomi could be found at the community kitchen down on Walnut Street, hair pulled back in a faded red scarf, ladling soup for people who reminded her of versions of herself. Quiet, tired people. People who had survived things they never told anyone. She never thought a church basement would be the place where her heart would stir again. But that's exactly where Elijah came in. He was 47, tall with kind eyes, always in a pressed shirt, and still wore his wedding band on a chain under his collar. A widower. His late wife, Lorraine, had passed 5 years earlier after a long battle with breast cancer, and since then, Elijah had poured himself into the church. He led Sunday prayers with a voice that never rose above a whisper, but always left the room hushed. People called him a God-fearing man. But Naomi noticed how he helped the elderly women to their cars, how he paused during Bible study when verses talked about loss, and how he always sat alone afterward in the back row, sipping coffee with both hands like it might slip away. Their first real conversation wasn't romantic. It was about grief. Naomi had stayed behind to wipe down tables, and Elijah asked if she believed people ever truly healed from heartbreak. She looked at him for a long time before saying, "I don't think we heal. I think we build around the crack." That was the start. A series of small, slow moments. He brought her coffee one Thursday evening, black, no sugar, just like she liked it. She noticed he always opened doors for her, always walked her to her car but never pushed. Naomi said she felt like she could breathe around him. Over the next year, they met quietly after service. Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into long walks. He met her daughter, who said Elijah was the only man who ever looked at her mother without trying to fix her. Naomi once told her friend at the kitchen, "I wasn't looking for fire, I just wanted peace." And for the first time in years, peace felt possible. Elijah asked her to marry him on the front steps of her late mother's chapel, the same one she'd once walked out of alone, in tears, years ago. But this time, she said yes. It wasn't about starting over. It was about finally starting right. The morning of the wedding began quietly. Too quietly. Naomi sat in the small bridal room at her mother's old chapel, letting the makeup artist work in silence. Outside, the sky was a soft gray, heavy with southern summer heat. But Naomi's thoughts weren't on the weather. She kept glancing at her phone, waiting for Elijah to text something sweet, something steady like he always did. But it stayed still on the table, the screen black. It was Kiara who said it first. She stepped into the room, straightening Naomi's train, and whispered, "Mama, is Elijah okay?" He looked off. Naomi smiled and said it was just nerves, but Kiara didn't smile back. He didn't even look me in the eye. It was just past 10:30 when Naomi's phone finally buzzed. A text. Unknown number. One line. "Don't marry him. He's not who you think." Naomi stared at it, her heart slowing to a dull thump. She showed no one. She just locked the screen and placed the phone face down. Her hands, freshly manicured, trembled. Outside, the bridesmaids laughed over mimosas. One of them, Tasha, a college friend, giggled. I heard Elijah's ex's family is still weirdly involved. Like, too involved. I don't know how you deal with that, girl. Naomi didn't answer. She just adjusted her earrings and looked out the stained glass window, trying not to imagine what involved meant. She remembered the first time Elijah had mentioned his late wife, how his voice cracked when he said her name. Lorraine. He kept photos of her in his study. Naomi had respected that grief. But now it felt like a shadow that hadn't left the room. Then came the moment Naomi would replay for years. From the second-story window, Kiara saw it. A woman in red, sharp suit, black heels, arguing with Elijah near the side parking lot. It wasn't loud, but it was intense. Elijah's hands moved fast, his head bowed. The woman's finger pointed at his chest, then at the church. And just like that, she turned, walked away, and disappeared around the corner. Kiara burst into the room, breathless. There's a woman, outside, with Elijah. Naomi stood too fast, her veil snagged on the chair. For a split second she thought about calling off the ceremony, but she told herself weddings come with nerves, with whispers, with drama. She told herself Elijah was just overwhelmed. That love was stronger than shadows. But the quiet that settled over the chapel didn't feel like peace anymore. Naomi held the tiny velvet box in her hand like it was made of glass. Inside were her father's cufflinks, silver simple, with the initials J.H. engraved on the backs. Her daddy had worn them on his wedding day, and Naomi had always kept them tucked in a drawer, waiting for someone who made her feel safe enough to pass them on. Elijah was that man, or at least she believed he was. She told Kiara she'd be right back, then slipped out of the bridal room and walked down the narrow hallway toward Elijah's prep room. The chapel was quiet, every creak of the floorboards louder than it should have been. Naomi paused outside his door, about to knock, but then she heard it. A voice. His voice. Soft, familiar. But it wasn't a prayer or a speech. It was a whisper. And he wasn't alone. Elijah. Let me just get through today. Once the honeymoon's over, I'll take care of everything. You know you're the one I want. Naomi didn't breathe. Her fingers clutched the cufflink box so tightly her knuckles turned white. She didn't hear the woman's response, only silence, then the soft sound of someone moving closer to him. Her feet wouldn't move. Her body didn't know whether to crash through the door or collapse. She didn't open the door. She didn't scream. She simply backed away and walked out of the church. Outside, the wind had picked up, pulling at the long veil pinned to her head. She walked around the side of the building, past the guests, past the chapel's faded white columns, and sat on the old stone bench beneath the dogwood tree, where she and Elijah had taken their engagement photos just 3 weeks earlier. She stared down at the cufflinks in her hand. Then she opened the box and let them fall into the grass. She didn't cry. Not yet. If you overheard your fiancé saying those words minutes before your wedding, what would you do? Would you walk away or would you wait for the truth? Let us know in the comments. Inside the chapel, the piano kept playing. Elijah stood at the altar, one hand resting gently over the other, glancing back toward the doors with a small, nervous smile that slowly began to fade. Guests shifted in the pews. A few whispered. Kiara paced near the bridal suite, checking her phone every 30 seconds, texting her mother with no reply. Bridesmaids looked at each other with growing discomfort. No one said the word yet, but everyone felt it. Something was wrong. Meanwhile, Naomi drove, alone. The veil was still clipped to her hair, the lace brushing her shoulder as she kept both hands on the steering wheel. She didn't have a plan. She just needed to breathe. The roads blurred as she headed east, past old cotton fields and shuttered gas stations until she finally pulled into the gravel driveway of her cousin Denise's house, a yellow single-story with a porch swing that had always felt like safety. Naomi didn't knock. Denise opened the door and saw the look on her face. Said nothing, just pulled her into a hug that said everything. That night, Naomi didn't talk much. She sat at the kitchen table in her dress, untouched wedding cake in a box on the counter, her eyes unfocused, her voice distant. And then, like a thread finally snapping loose, she whispered, "This ain't the first time I felt it coming." And the memory hit her like a chill. Her first marriage had ended not with a confession, but with a receipt, one she found tucked in the back of his jeans pocket. A hotel, a time, a name. He'd denied it, of course, swore she was overthinking, but the lie had already spoken to her long before he ever opened his mouth. My mama always said, "A woman can sense a lie before it's even spoken." Naomi remembered those words now, and they rang in her ears like a warning she hadn't wanted to hear. By morning, Elijah had called her 16 times. No texts, just calls. The voicemails all started the same. His voice low, desperate, layered with panic he was trying hard to control. The last one came just after 8 a.m. "Elijah. Naomi. Whatever you think you heard, it wasn't like that. Please, please don't do this to us. Just call me back. Let me explain. I love you." But Naomi didn't return the call. Not yet. Because a small voice in her gut, the same voice that had saved her once before, was whispering again. Tell us in the comments. Do you think she owed him a second chance? Or did she already know the truth? And if this story feels familiar, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happened next. By the third day, Naomi still hadn't responded to Elijah. Her dress hung in Denise's hallway closet, still bearing the scent of lilac perfume and warm June air. But something in Naomi had shifted. The silence gave her space to think, but also space to search. Kiara sat across from her, sleeves rolled up, laptop open, brows furrowed. "Mama," she said, "do you want to know who sent that message?" Naomi didn't answer right away. Then she nodded, slow but certain. "I do. I need to." It started with the phone number. It had no name, just 10 digits and a message Naomi would never forget. Kiara worked backward. Social media, app records, even a reverse lookup. And then a name surfaced. Tasha Monroe, 26. Former choir member. Used to sing soprano next to Elijah every other Sunday. Naomi remembered her now. Bright smile, red lipstick, always the last to leave after service. What she hadn't known was that Tasha stopped attending almost 2 years ago, right around the time Elijah had quietly moved some savings into a separate account. Denise checked public records. Kiara checked Venmo. And piece by piece, a story emerged Naomi hadn't asked for, but could no longer ignore. Tasha had been receiving monthly payments from Elijah for nearly 2 years. Rent, car repairs, a tuition bill marked for nursing school, and more recently, a medical expense from a women's clinic, unlabeled, but suggestive. Naomi sat still as Kiara laid it all out. She didn't cry. She just asked, "Is she pregnant?" Kiara didn't answer. She didn't need to. The betrayal wasn't just personal now. It was deliberate, organized, hidden under scripture and Sunday suits. Naomi picked up her phone, opened old messages, and found one from Elijah months ago when he said he had to cancel dinner to meet with a young member in crisis. The timestamp matched a payment to Tasha. And then another truth unraveled. Naomi had always respected the church elders, men who prayed over her engagement, laid hands on Elijah with blessing. But when she reached out to one of them, just to ask, just to see, his voice hesitated, his words stumbled. And finally, quietly, he said, "Naomi, this isn't the first time Elijah's had trouble with boundaries." She hung up the phone and sat back. The weight of it all pressed down. This wasn't cold feet. This wasn't gossip. This was a pattern. And the people who could have stopped it stayed quiet. Naomi looked at Kiara and said, "He fooled all of them. But not me. Not anymore." Naomi stood in front of the mirror, zipping up the wedding gown she once believed would mark the beginning of her forever. The satin still shimmered. The lace still clung delicately to her shoulders. But this time, she added one thing. A crimson ribbon tied tightly around her waist. It was her mama's idea years ago, a bit of old Southern folklore. A woman betrayed ties red at her center to remind the world. A broken heart still beats. She didn't cancel the wedding. Not officially. The church still held the flowers, the chairs, the printed programs. But Naomi wasn't going back to be a bride. She was going back to be heard. Denise helped her set up the camera in the guest bedroom. The light from the window hit just right. Soft, solemn, honest. Naomi looked straight into the lens. No makeup, no tears, just truth. She pressed record. Her voice didn't shake. Elijah, this isn't how I wanted our story to end. But this is the part you chose. You didn't just lie to me. You built a home with someone else while asking me to build one with you. And to the congregation I stood before. To the women who whispered in hallways, and the men who laid hands on our union while knowing his past. I see you. I forgive none of you. She spoke for 7 minutes. No yelling, no insults, just the facts. Tasha's name, the payments, the silence from the elders, the voicemail. She ended it the way Elijah never expected. I wore this dress to start a new chapter. I'm wearing it now to close one. My vows were real. I just needed to know if yours were too. Turns out they weren't. So I'm saying mine now, to myself. I vow never again to love someone louder than they love me. I vow to trust the voice inside me more than the voices around me. And I vow that the next time I walk into a chapel, it won't be to prove I'm worthy. It'll be because I already know I am. She uploaded the video to a private link and sent it to Elijah and the church's leadership team. Then she printed out copies of her vows, each folded and sealed in an envelope, and placed them on the front pew of the chapel that Sunday morning. Naomi didn't come to be saved. She came to deliver a message, and everyone would hear it before the last hymn was sung. The chapel was packed, every seat filled, murmurs rippling like soft thunder across the stained glass silence. Guests who thought the wedding had been postponed were surprised to receive a last-minute message. She's coming after all. The organ began to play just past noon, the same song Naomi had chosen months ago, a slow hymn her mother used to hum while folding laundry. Elijah stood at the altar, shoulders lifted, breath tight in his chest. He hadn't spoken to Naomi in days, his texts unread, his calls unanswered. But now, here she was, Naomi, in the dress, bouquet in hand, crimson ribbon cinched like a scar across the white silk. She walked alone. No escort, no veil. Halfway down the aisle, Elijah's face softened, relief flooding him as if grace had been restored. But Naomi didn't look at him. Her eyes scanned the room instead. The congregation, the choir loft, the elders. Then she stopped, turned toward the DJ in the back and raised one hand. The music halted. A breathless pause. Then, a voice began to play. It was Elijah's. Let me just get through today. Once the honeymoon's over, I'll take care of everything. You know you're the one I want. Gasps broke across the sanctuary like cracks in glass. Someone dropped their program. An elder shook his head in disbelief. Elijah tried to step forward, his face pale, lips parted. But Naomi held up her hand again. Silence returned. In the fourth pew, a woman stood. It was Tasha. She didn't speak, but her presence said everything Naomi didn't need to explain. A few guests turned toward her. One woman muttered a prayer. Tasha looked at Elijah, then at Naomi, and slowly sat back down, trembling. For a moment, the room teetered between reverence and riot. 2 ushers stepped forward, but Naomi simply walked past them, climbed the steps to the altar, and turned to face the congregation. She opened her hand and unfolded a piece of paper, her vows. But not the ones she wrote for Elijah. These were the ones she wrote for herself. Her voice was clear, unapologetic. To the man I thought I'd marry, you took my trust. You took my peace. You took the love I offered with open hands. But today, I take something back. I take back my voice. I take back my worth. I take back the version of me that almost settled because she believed silence was strength. She looked directly at Elijah. Today I don't say I do. I say goodbye. And she placed the vows on the pulpit, handed the bouquet to the nearest usher, and turned to walk out. This time not in silence, but to the sound of a standing ovation. One by one, women rose to their feet, then the choir, then even a few of the elders. And as Naomi stepped out into the daylight, the air felt different, lighter, honest. She hadn't come to marry. She'd come to set herself free. Naomi walked out of that chapel with her head held high. Not to applause, not to whispers, this time to both. Some people stood for her, some stared in stunned silence. A few turned their heads, clutching pearls and purses. But she didn't flinch, not once. Her heels hit the stone steps like punctuation marks. Every step forward, one more truth spoken. Elijah didn't follow. He couldn't. By the end of that week, the truth had unraveled itself with no help from her. Tasha confirmed everything. The affair, the money, the promises whispered in cars and back pews. And when confronted by a local reporter, Elijah gave no comment. But the silence was louder than a confession. 3 elders from the church quietly stepped down. Moral oversight, the statement read. But for Naomi, it wasn't about titles. It was about trust. And the community that once praised Elijah's character had to reckon with its own blind spots. Naomi didn't return to that chapel again, but she didn't retreat either. 3 months later, she launched a podcast, Red Flags, Ribbon Ties. Just her voice, a microphone, and stories, hers and others. Each episode began the same. Welcome, sister. If your heart is tired, you're in the right place. The show gained traction faster than she expected. Women from all over wrote in. Stories poured in. Emails, voicemails, anonymous letters. Naomi read everyone. And then, someone uploaded a clip of her altar speech. The moment she said, "Today I don't say I do, I say goodbye." It hit 1 million views in a week. By the end of the month, a young spoken word artist in Atlanta turned Naomi's words into a viral poem titled Naomi's Vows. Naomi never asked to be a voice for anyone, but when the world handed her a microphone, she spoke, not out of vengeance, but clarity, calm, quiet strength. The kind women aren't often allowed to show at a pulpit. She didn't get the wedding she dreamed of, but she got the freedom she'd been praying for all along. And sometimes walking alone is exactly how you find yourself. They say weddings are about forever, but sometimes forever starts the moment you walk away. Naomi didn't leave with a husband, but she left with something much harder to earn, clarity. In the months that followed, she didn't hide. She rebuilt, quietly, purposefully. She and Kiara began cooking again just like they used to, Sunday afternoons filled with gospel music and old family recipes. Sometimes they'd laugh so hard they forgot what day it was. Other days, Naomi would pause mid-stir and just say, "Thank you, Lord, for the storm I didn't marry." She began speaking at women's events, not about pain, but about discernment, about learning to listen when the stillness speaks louder than the noise. She'd say, "Peace isn't passive, it's power," and I stopped mistaking silence for safety. Naomi's story wasn't the fairy tale she once hoped for. It was something better, real, raw, redemptive. And the truth is, some stories aren't about fairy tales at all. They're about freedom, and the strength it takes to choose yourself when everything around you begs you not to. Now we want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were Naomi? Would you have walked away quietly, or walked down that aisle like she did, with the truth in your hand and the world watching? Let us know in the comments. And if her courage moved you even a little, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that remind us love should never come with lies.